Barely a leaf left on a tree. Welcome back to GP Outdoors. Today, I'm going to go through a lot of the questions that I've received over firewood season. And given it's negative 6 degrees Celsius, or I'm not sure what that is Fahrenheit, but it's definitely below freezing, we're going to try to do it quick. So if there are any segments of the video that you're not really interested in, just fast forward to the next segment. And hopefully one of your questions is in here and I'll have it answered for you. Now that we've wrapped up firewood season 2022. Over the years, as I built or bought different pieces, I've done videos, but so many of you asked me over the last few months to just do one span of all of my PPE to show you what it is that I use. Let's do it. First up, the forestry helmet. Always got to wear one. You'll see that they're pretty much standard and they range in price from anywhere around $50 right up to $300–400. And in fact, the real professional ones, they'll go up $700–800– $900 for a helmet. But you can get a good or a reasonably good approved helmet for around $50 or $60. Comes with earmuffs. Usually they're around 22 to 28 dB for ear protection. You'll have a mask. You'll notice that some will have a full mask like you see I have. Some will only have a half mask. This is a steel mesh. Super important, especially when you're using a chainsaw or a splitter. Saves your face. I highly recommend you go with the full face. That way you're saved everywhere. You're not just saved to here. This is a stihl. I believe they call it the advanced vented. It's because there's little wee vents here. I personally dislike this helmet, so I would strongly suggest you look elsewhere. It was $150, and in fact, the old helmet I have, which cost me about $55, I like far more. For some reason, this helmet fits really tight on the head. The harness inside doesn't really fully encapsulate the skull or the cap in the back of your skull. It kind of sits on top, and I just believe it's kind of flimsy made, especially for the money. But either way, it's a must-have in the forest. If you don't have it, maybe you're at the splitter or you prefer not to wear a forestry helmet, you got to make sure you've got a good quality set of earmuffs. These, I believe, are negative 25 dB protection. Pretty cheap, 20 bucks, not a big deal. And of course, safety glasses. But again, if you're working with wood, I highly recommend you get something with that steel mesh. I've been hit in the face a few times, and on rare occasion earlier on, before I took more of an interest in PPE, I got it in the eye a couple times too. It's not pretty. No serious damage, but it's kind of irritating and hurts a little bit. If you don't like the big muffs, I've got isotunes, and I love these isotunes. They're earbuds, but they offer, I believe, 27 dB of protection. They're also Bluetooth. You can hear music, or in my case, I like to listen to the local news when I'm working, or the weather, so I know what's coming in, because it changes so rapidly up here. But it's a great product. You don't see it as often as you used to, because my daughter also likes them. I think I know what she's getting for Christmas. Chainsaw gloves. These are actually chainsaw gloves. It's not just a pair of cowhide gloves with the name Stihl or Husqvarna on them, which I find, by the way, are overpriced, and I did actually fall for it and spend the 40 bucks once. It lasted me 5 uses on the splitter before I started getting holes in the fingers. I believe this is a pig skin or a goat skin. The difference between regular work gloves and these chainsaw gloves is that the left hand will be full of usually something like ballistic nylon, which these are. And that's for chainsaw protection in the event of kickback. These were not bad. They were around $29– $30. The problem I've noticed is that it's very difficult to find chainsaw gloves. They're out there online, and there's various different makes, but what you're looking for is a good hide and ballistic nylon, or something Kevlar in some cases, in the back of the left hand. Worth the money. The most recent addition to my repertoire is this solo chainsaw trauma kit made by Forest Safety Products down in the US. Especially if you're like me, small property or large property owner, but you do a lot of work in the forest or with the chainsaw or the tractor by yourself. Very important to spend the $115 US and get yourself protected, or at least have something ready on your belt in the case of a trauma or an accident. Chainsaw chaps. They look like this. Or in my case, I decided to spend a little extra money and I bought some chainsaw pants. About $180 Canadian for the pants. I like them a lot. They fit nice, lots of pockets, and they've also got vents for air in the summertime. These chaps, you'll notice they're kind of heavy. There's a lot of ballistic nylon or Kevlar in here. And you can also purchase what they call a chainsaw apron. I have one. It's a Husqvarna. I like it a lot. It's similar to the Chap, but there's a slight difference to the design. You can get a good quality pair of Chaps, probably about $60. As I said, I decided to go with the pants. I like them a lot. I can wear them all day, but they were about 180 Canadian. This one's going to hurt a bit. Chainsaw boots. These are not inexpensive. You can get a pair of rubber chainsaw boots, kind of at that beginning quality, at around $200. This pair is a vinyl pair. I love these. They're arborist boots, fully chainsaw protected. Cost me about $550 Canadian. Not cheap. However, if you've been on the channel a while, you'll know that the summer before last, I did 2 videos running a chainsaw against a chainsaw boot or a green patch steel toe, steel shank work boot. We all think that the work boot is going to protect you, and absolutely the toe is going to be protected. You've got a steel plate in there, but you'll see on those videos, I'll put links to them or excerpts as we talk. The leather or the material on that boot cannot stand up to a chainsaw. Within a split second or a fraction of a second, that chainsaw is already into your foot. That's why I decided to investigate and research and got myself a pair of chainsaw boots. But like I said, they're not cheap, but they'll protect you. So altogether, I'm in for just over $1,000 Canadian on my PPE. But a couple of things I'd like to mention. One, there are less expensive options to what you see me wearing on the channel. 2, it's important to note that PPE is not a guarantee against injury. Its job is to mitigate the potential or the risk of injury or the extent of injury that you would have otherwise suffered if you hadn't been wearing the PPE. Or at least that's my interpretation of it. And thirdly, you want to make sure that whatever it is that you're purchasing matches the chainsaw that you're using. If you look in your manual, every chainsaw will have a class or a category of, or a rating assigned to it. In Europe, the ratings are different than the US, but there's tables online that will line them up for you. But the ratings are responsive to the size or the power or the speed of that chainsaw. So for example, I believe my 261 is considered a category 21. In other words, it spins at I think 3,200 RPM. So when you're purchasing your chaps or your boots or your gloves, you'll notice that on them, you'll see a UL rating for the US, sometimes an ANSI rating, or you'll see, it'll tell you what it's compliant with, or it'll come right out as this does and tell you it's a class 1 pant, which I believe is the equivalent of a 21 here in North America. So in other words, this pant is going to be okay for my 261. Same as your boots. The boots or any type of wear, somewhere on that boot, you'll see that there's a patch that will tell you what class it protects up to. In other words, how powerful a chainsaw you can use with them, that it's actually going to be effective. Okay, I know that was a mouthful or a lot, but I think I answered all your questions. If you have any more, please leave them in the comments. I'll try my best to answer them. I'm not an expert on this stuff. It's just things I've learned over the years. Yes, I absolutely agree with it, and I do it myself. If you look in the manual, it'll tell you that below a certain temperature, you need to start using light bar oil, not the medium stuff you've been running all summer. And right now that the next 2 weeks forecast shows us basically a high of 1 degree, I've already changed over yesterday. And additionally, don't forget to flip that baffle on your carburetor for winter usage. How fuel efficient is this Easton-made axis? It has a 14 horse Briggs & Stratton on it. The fuel tank will take 6 liters of gas, which is roughly 1.5 gallons if you're in the US. At today's prices, buying premium gas at $1.84 a liter, you'll get just under 4 hours of operating time on every tank full, which will work out to about $2.90 Canadian per hour. GP, are you guys burning fully seasoned wood, or is there some green wood in there? Let me explain. Yeah, you bet. Some of this wood is not fully seasoned, but a lot of it is. And I would probably say roughly 80% of it is seasoned or fully seasoned. And of course, there is some wet stuff and there's some stuff that still needs a little seasoning. But we've got about 20 to 21 bush cord of wood back here. And each year you probably noticed that at some point at the beginning of the summer, you'll see in one of the videos, as I did this summer again, that there's a couple of cord of wood left at the very far end of the shed. And you'll see Guy or myself or somebody taking the wood that's remaining from last year and moving it up to the front of the row by the boiler. We've learned that putting the Easton-made access right about here is kind of ideal for filling the shed out, because as you know, it's 8 feet between each one of these uprights, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 bays. So we got 32 feet of firewood, plus we could fit another bush cord or two in the far end on the other side of the boiler. But when you see in the background, or you notice a splitting wood, you'll notice that as we begin each one of these 7 rows to the front, you'll notice that we start the row on the ground on the far right by the boiler, and then we also start stacking on the far end on the left here while we're splitting wood. And you'll see that whoever is doing the stacking is taking a look at the wood after it's split, and they'll either turn right or they'll turn left to stack it. If it's more wet and it's not fully seasoned or not dry enough, they stack to the back. If it is good dry wood, it gets stacked to the front. And that works generally well for most of the wood. But you do get into positions or times when you're at a point where you don't have any more room and you got to put some of that unseasoned stuff a little forward. So yeah, there's a mix. But generally speaking, it's pretty seasoned, most of it. And here's why. Over the years, we've processed our firewood in various different forms or different methods or means, and it's changed over time. Not just out of our own experience and knowledge, but from a lot of feedback from you good folks. And over the last few years, one of the changes we've made is we started dropping large numbers of trees or cutting them down every summer and throughout the summer. And we leave them. And we harvest them as we need them, which means a lot of the wood you see split and stacked in that woodshed has been laying on the forest floor for a couple of years drying out. In fact, much of it was dead standing when we cut it down, because we go after those first. And every once in a while, as you probably saw in the last few weeks, we run a little short, and we end up cutting down a few more trees and dragging them in. And in some cases, they're dead standing, so they're nice and dry. In other cases, they're a little green. But you get a mix. So when you get to splitting it, you can tell pretty easily whether it's nice and dry or whether it's still wet. It's not just by the way it splits or the pop it makes, but once you separate the split and look down, you can generally tell after a while what's wet and what's not. And that's why you'll see that Husky Bob or myself or Guy will grab those splits and either turn to the left or turn to the right when they go to stack it on the next row. GP, are you replanting? What are you doing for the environment? Are you not killing the forest? You'd be surprised how often I get a comment to that similar tone. No, we're not. We don't replant and we don't reforest because we don't have to. Let's go for a ride. This is a classic example of Mother Nature at her best. For those of you that have been with me a while, you'll remember that 3 winters ago, we had one of the winter storms that came through, knocked down a big cherry tree as well as several others, and a number of trees got damaged right in this hole you see here where all the saplings are. You'll remember it fell on my boat, as did some of the others to the side of the boat. And Guy and I spent all day on that video cleaning up the mess, getting that wood out of there. And as a result, what used to be a wall of green and leaves between me and my neighbor, in other words, basically a natural privacy fence, ended up with a great big gaping hole in the middle. The gaping hole in what used to be my privacy fence, my natural privacy fence, allowed my neighbor to see directly into my main area in front of my house, as well as me to see his main area in front of his cottage. And one of the things I loved about this property is the privacy. However, 3 summers later, take a good look in here. All of these saplings that you see have grown, most all of them anyways, in the last 3 years, from nothing. And if you notice the couple of times I did chipping videos here, I chipped them right behind the camera, right by this opening. And you may have noticed, and if you don't, you can check it out. This is all covered again. And once again, I can't see through and he can't see through to me. Mother Nature, 3 summers. Why are you leaving all these stumps all over the forest? There's good firewood in here. Why are you cutting so high and why are you not cutting at ground level? One reason? Guy likes to have a little chair to rest on every once in a while throughout the forest along the trails. Chair, chair. That's one big reason. Another reason, laziness, or we just run out of time that day. But we eventually, if there's good wood, we'll do what we call stump days. And we'll haul back here with a trailer and an ATV and a chainsaw, and we'll cut them down. Remember this guy? It was one of the first ones I felled 2 weeks ago. We came back a few days ago, grabbed the stump. It's good wood. It's maple. So we don't generally leave them unless in the past somebody's just left them and forgot them. But there's great wood in that stump, so you don't want to leave it unless there's a good reason. The last reason, in the wintertime, when you're scooting around back here on a snowmobile or an ATV, and you guys know Husky Bob, he is so proud of those big Chainsaw tracks he has in his ATV. He loves screaming through the forest in the winter in 2 or 3 feet of snow. But we also have a ton of rock everywhere. So depending on where we felled the tree, Guy will take a look and decide to either leave that stump high or cut it down and harvest the wood. Because in the wintertime with a few feet of snow, small stumps like that get buried. And coming through here on any type of an ATV or a snowmobile can be treacherous. So in some areas, he'll take a look around at the terrain and he'll tell us, leave the stump this time. Because that way somebody has a visible means of recognizing danger or an area to stay out of in the wintertime. For that same reason, if you're a new property owner, you're not going to like what I have to say. You're going to find that some people's kids are raised to think that it's okay to trespass on your private property. And Guy's got 100 acres here, and it is very common that through the wintertime, including other times of the year, people are screaming through his property and his forest on their ATVs and snowmobiles. So it's just another reason why in some areas like this, you want to leave your stumps high. It kind of tells them to stay away from these areas so that there isn't any damage or injury on your property. And here. On a fashion note, GP, what are you wearing this winter? Well, I'm going back to the Kinko buffalo skin gloves, which was one of the 5 pairs I tested out last winter. You'll recall they were my absolute favorite. Made down in the USA, or at least distributed in the USA. They're a buffalo skin, they're lined, they are incredibly comfortable, great or high dexterity. And they're covered with something they call their hydroflector, which is a water resistant type of a coating. But they were by far, out of all 5 gloves, my #1 favorite. You may recall back last January, I started to see a rip just below the thumb. And I don't know if I caused that rip or by catching it on something sharp or if it was a quality issue, but I had already gone ahead and ordered another pair because I loved them so much. So these are going to be my go-to gloves for the foreseeable future this winter. We'll see how they make it out. GP, enough of the firewood. Get back to using the tractor more. And then at another time of the year, I get, all right, enough tractor stuff. When are you going to get back to firewood? Every year, like clockwork, just like the last couple of weeks. I'm very, very grateful for the growth on this channel over the last few years. But with that growth means that the demographic changes a little bit. Some of you in some cohort are here watching just for tractor activities, whether it's implements, different types of uses for the tractor. Some are here for forestry and firewood. Some are here for other types of things or the general property maintenance that you see on the channel, because maybe you're a new property owner. But across that demographic, some of you are here for all 3 things, and some of you are more interested in some activities than others. But I'd ask you to keep in mind that the simple basis of the channel is showing you what I do here to maintain this property and the things I do around this property every day or every week. I still to this day, I don't manufacture content for you good folks. I don't make up content. I just show you what I do. And given that I've got a property in a climate that sees all 4 seasons, that means that a lot of activities are seasonal. So what that means every year is that during kind of the warmer, the summer months, you see a lot more tractor activity than you do, say, firewood. We do it on and off throughout the summer, but that's not our real main drive. So you'll see me using the tractor in different applications with different implements and those kind of things, and very little firewood related activities. But then in the fall, firewood every day for about a month and a half. And that's why usually, as I did this year in September on one of the videos, I'll say, hey, I hope you like firewood, because from now until around the beginning of November, pretty much all you're going to see is firewood, because that's all you see. And then in the wintertime, starting in a few weeks, right through till probably around the end of April, 90% of the content you'll see is me clearing snow with that tractor. The odd other thing will be thrown in there as it comes up, but things are seasonal. So I do appreciate that you love, or a lot of you love, the variety that you see on the channel over the year. But I'd ask you to remember that things are seasonally driven, right? And that's why you'll find from time to time that you'll see a prolonged period of one type of activity or related activity versus the more of a variety that you see in the early spring and midsummer.